There was a product that every town on Earth once needed, printed and stacked and delivered by the millions of tons, every single day, without fail. Those machines are among the largest moving objects human beings have ever built, longer than a football field, running a sheet at the speed of a car on a highway, day and night. For a century, owning one of these machines was close to a license to print money, because the thing they printed was the very paper that the news itself was printed on. Whole towns grew up around these mills. Fortunes were built on them. For generations, if you owned the machine that made the paper the world read, you owned a slice of the world itself. That product is newsprint. Yet today, the demand for it has collapsed by around 90% from its peak. Its giants have gone bankrupt. Its mills have fallen silent by the dozen. An entire industry that once seemed as permanent as the morning paper folded. Here is the part almost nobody understands. You would assume the internet killed the paper mill. It did not. It only changed what the mill makes. Because the very same machines that once poured out newsprint are now, in many cases, booming. They make the cardboard boxes that the same internet ships to your door. Same fiber. Same giant machines. Opposite fates. One kind of paper is dying while another explodes, often inside the very same building. By the end of this video, you will know what a paper mill actually costs, why it can almost never just stop, and why the mills that survived did not fight the internet. They fed it. The buy-in. Start with what a paper mill actually is, because at its heart sits one colossal, unforgiving machine. First, you make pulp. Wood is ground and cooked into a slurry of fiber and water, or old paper and boxes are pulped back down into that same fiber. This is the raw material. Then comes the machine itself, the descendant of an invention called the Fourdrinier. Wet fiber is sprayed onto a moving wire screen, and from that instant, a sheet of paper is being born. It is a kind of controlled miracle. A watery slurry that is more than 99 parts water goes in one end, and a dry, continuous sheet of paper comes off the other, folded onto a reel taller than a person. That sheet races down the machine, squeezed between rollers, then dried over rows of hot cylinders, then wound onto a reel. It travels at the speed of a car on the motorway. A single modern paper machine can cost hundreds of millions of dollars, and the biggest, over $1 billion. This one machine is the whole business. Think about that balance. Almost everything you spend is on one machine and the fiber and heat to run it. Get that one machine pointed at the wrong product, and no clever trick anywhere else can rescue you. Fiber feeds it cheaply, but its hunger is beyond belief. A large mill devours whole forests of wood, or mountains of recycled paper, every single day. Making a ton of fresh pulp from virgin wood can take around 3.5 tons of harvested timber, so the appetite for raw fiber is enormous. There are tiers, and this is where fortunes are decided. Packaging grades, like the container board for cardboard boxes, are booming. Graphic grades, like newsprint and magazine paper, are dying. Whatever grade you make, you are buying the same basic thing. A giant continuous machine, a river of fiber to feed it, and a mountain of energy to dry it. Your chosen grade decides your fate. What you inherit. You inherit a machine that hates to stop, and a market that will not let you set your own price. A paper machine is built to run continuously, around the clock, for weeks and months at a stretch. Each start and stop wastes fiber, energy, and time, and strains the whole giant assembly. Picture a machine the length of a street, threaded with a paper sheet moving faster than city traffic, that must be kept threaded and running perfectly for weeks on end. Stopping it is a small disaster every time. Worse, if you shut a machine down for good, restarting it later costs tens of millions of dollars and takes months. A cold machine is a trapped fortune. You also inherit the curse of the commodity. Plain paper is plain paper. You are a price taker, forced to accept whatever the market pays, with almost no power to charge more. In a commodity like this, you compete on cost and nothing else. If a rival across the ocean can make the same paper a little cheaper, buyers will take theirs, and your only answer is to cut your own costs to the bone. You inherit ferocious appetites for energy and water. Making and drying paper is one of the most energy-hungry things in all of manufacturing, and the mill drinks water like a river. You inherit weight and bulk. Paper and board are heavy and voluminous, so like cement and glass, they cannot travel far before freight eats the profit. Each mill serves its region. You also inherit a whole town. Big mills are often the beating heart of the places they sit in, employing thousands, which makes the decision to ever close one brutally hard. So what you really inherit is a giant, hungry machine, locked to one kind of paper, in a market that sets your price, that you cannot cheaply stop and cannot cheaply change. The revenue layers, a paper mill earns from several streams, but which one you are built for decides whether you are riding a boom or a funeral. Consider how strange this is. A single industry contains one of the fastest growing product lines in the modern economy, and one of the fastest dying, side by side, made on nearly identical machines. Layer 1, the boom. Containerboard and packaging. Brown paper that becomes cardboard boxes, driven relentlessly upward by online shopping. This is where the industry money now flows. Layer 2, the collapse. Newsprint and graphic paper. Paper of newspapers, magazines, and catalogs, in a decline so steep that whole mills have switched off. Layer 3, the steady one. Tissue. Toilet paper, towels, napkins. Boring, unglamorous, and wonderfully immune to the internet, because no screen has ever replaced it. Layer 4, the pulp itself. Some mills sell dried market pulp to other mills, turning wood straight into a traded commodity that the rest of the industry buys. Notice how much a mill can wring from one load of wood. Fiber for the sheet, waste for power, chemicals recovered and reused. A well-run mill wastes almost nothing that comes through its gates. Layer 5, and a quiet advantage. Energy. Mills burn their own wood waste and pulping liquors to power themselves, and the best sell surplus electricity back to the grid. But notice the fork. Boxes, newsprint, tissue, pulp, and power all come from the same kind of machine and the same fiber. Whichever stream you are plumbed into is everything. Listen to that again. Here is the fact that rewrites this entire industry, and it is worth stopping on. A machine that made the newspaper can often be rebuilt to make the cardboard box. Same fiber, same footprint, opposite destiny. Listen to that again. Digital did not destroy the demand for paper. It moved it. It killed the page and it built the parcel. Every online order you place is wrapped in the answer. That catalog you no longer receive and the box on your doorstep were, in a real sense, made on cousins of the same machine. Between 2014 and 2022, dozens of North American mills shut down for good, around 59 of them. Survivors were often the ones that converted to packaging. So you never really owned a paper mill. You owned a bet on which kind of paper the world would still want. And the world stopped wanting the news on paper, started wanting the box. So the winners never asked whether people still read. They asked what people now buy, and how it ships. That answer, wrapped in brown board, was arriving on porches by the billion. So the same wave that emptied the newsstands filled the loading docks. Print advertising drained away, but shipping cartons poured in, and the fiber followed the money to a new door. Stern to what leaves the account. Because a paper mill is a giant funnel that swallows cheap things in enormous quantities. Fiber is the first great cost. Wood pulp or recycled paper, bought by the mountain. Cheap per ton, but the mill eats so much that even a small price move swings the whole business. Energy is the second, and it is brutal. Drying a wet sheet at high speed takes staggering amounts of heat and power, so a spike in gas or electricity prices lands like a hammer. Then the machine itself, a bottomless pit for capital. It must be maintained constantly, and every so often rebuilt. And if you want to change grades, converting it costs a fortune. Converting a machine from a dying grade to a booming one is not cheap. One Chinese giant spent around $190 million to convert just 2 machines to packaging. Then freight, because paper is bulky and heavy, and must be trucked to customers who are never far enough away. Then labor, a shrinking pool of skilled operators who take years to train. Beneath it all sits the fixed cost of a machine that wants to run flat out. It does not care if prices are high or low. It wants fiber and heat, every hour, or it starts to lose money fast. Notice the shape of it. Your costs run flat and relentless. Fiber and heat and the giant machine, while your revenue rides a wild commodity price that you do not set. Thin margins, squeezed from both sides. The trap. Here is the trap, and it is the cruelest one in this whole series, because it can turn a great business into a corpse without a single thing going wrong on the factory floor. You spent hundreds of millions on a machine built to make one grade of paper superbly. It runs beautifully. Your crew is skilled. Your costs are tight. And none of that can save you, because the demand for your grade can structurally collapse, not dip, not cycle, vanish, permanently, as the world changes underneath you. Newspapers do not come back once they are gone. You are chained to that machine. You cannot cheaply stop it, because a cold machine is tens of millions to restart. You cannot cheaply switch it, because converting the grade costs a fortune. So watch the vice close. Your grade is dying, the price is falling below what it costs you to make, and every mill in the same trap keeps running anyway, just to cover its cash costs. That collective refusal to stop floods the market, drives the price down further, and deepens everyone's losses. That industry cannot cut fast enough, so the pain drags on for years. That is the trap in one sentence. A magnificent machine, perfectly run, pointed at a product the world has quietly decided it no longer needs, and far too expensive to stop or to change. Watch a whole industry do this at once. When a grade dies, every owner faces the same wall, and most keep running, rather than eat the cost of stopping. So the glut lingers, and the bleeding spreads to all of them. To see how a machine this powerful came to exist, and how its inventors were destroyed by it, go back to two brothers in London more than 200 years ago. Their names were Henry and Sealy Fourdrinier, London stationers in the early 1800s, and their name is stamped on nearly every paper machine on Earth today. Before their machine, all paper was made painfully by hand, one single sheet at a time, dipped and dried by skilled workers. It was slow, and it capped how cheap paper could ever be. A French inventor named Louis Robert had sketched a machine that could make paper in one endless continuous web, instead of single sheets. That idea was revolutionary, but it did not yet work. Imagine the leap. For all of human history, every sheet of paper had been made one at a time, by hand. A machine that could pour paper out endlessly, like cloth from a loom, would change what humanity could afford to write down. Both Fourdrinier brothers put their fortune behind it. They hired the brilliant engineer Brian Donkin to build and perfect it. And by the early 1800s, a working machine was making an endless sheet. But perfecting it devoured them. They spent over £60,000, a staggering sum then, chasing a machine that competitors quietly copied, while patent lawsuits drained what was left. In 1810, the Fourdrinier brothers were declared bankrupt. A machine that would reshape the modern world had ruined the very men who paid to build it. Sit with the cruelty of it. They gave the world the machine that made paper cheap enough for everyone, that carried books and news and learning to millions, and it paid them with ruin. That machine spread everywhere. Donkin's firm alone built almost 200 of them before Henry Fourdrinier died, and countless more followed across the world. Decades later, Parliament granted the ruined brothers a token payment of £7,000. That, and their name on the machine, was almost all they ever got for changing civilization. They lived to see hundreds of their machines running in mills around the world, pouring out oceans of cheap paper, from which they themselves earned almost nothing at all. Brian Donkin, the engineer they hired to build it, prospered greatly. Those who dreamed it and funded it did not. That is often how the biggest inventions pay out. The death spiral. Now watch how a paper giant dies in the modern age, through the fall of the largest newsprint maker the world had ever seen. In 2007, two huge forestry companies, Abitibi and Bowater, merged into a single colossus called Abitibi-Bowater, the biggest newsprint producer on the planet. Consider the confidence of that moment. Merging at the top of the market, betting bigger than anyone ever had on newsprint, exactly as the ground beneath newsprint was starting to give way. On paper, it looked mighty. Dozens of pulp and paper facilities, customers in more than 90 countries, and a product every newspaper on Earth had to buy. It seemed untouchable, but it carried a crushing load of debt, close to $9 billion. Right as its one core product, newsprint, was falling off a cliff, and a credit crisis froze the world. That math was merciless. Newsprint demand was collapsing, as newspapers shrank and readers moved online. So revenue fell exactly when the giant debt payments came due. In 2009, unable to refinance its debts in a frozen credit market, Abitibi-Bowater filed for bankruptcy protection in both the United States and Canada. It was not alone. Months earlier, another paper major, Smurfit Stone, had filed too. A whole newsprint-dependent world was buckling at the same time. Watch the lesson land. It was not a bad company or a broken machine that fell. It was a giant that bet everything on a product the world was quietly walking away from, and borrowed heavily to do it. That company survived, but only by shrinking, shedding debt, and reinventing itself under a new name, pointed away from the dying newspaper and toward other grades. That is the death spiral of this business. Not a factory that failed, but a bet that failed. Its biggest mills, most committed to the dying grade, made the loudest and heaviest fall. The survivors, so who survives, and how? Survivors did one unsentimental thing above all. They stopped mourning the newspaper and started printing the box. First, they converted. Rather than defend a dying grade, they spent the fortune to rebuild their machines for packaging and rode the e-commerce boom the internet handed them. Every parcel the internet ships had to be wrapped in something, and that something is made on a paper machine. So the very force that killed one grade handed the survivors a booming new one. Second, they leaned on recycled fiber. Old cardboard collected and pulped back into new boxes is cheaper than virgin wood and endlessly reusable, a loop that feeds the packaging boom. Third, they ran at brutal scale and closed the weak. Those giants focused on their best, biggest, lowest cost machines and shut the old ones, keeping the strong mills running full. Notice the discipline in that. Closing a working mill is brutal. It guts a town. But the survivors did it anyway, concentrating their fiber and their fight into the few machines that could still win. One industry leader described it as focusing on the 20% of assets that drive 80% of the value, and closing the rest without sentiment. Fourth, they made their own power. Burning wood waste and pulping liquors. The best mills run largely on their own energy and sell the surplus, blunting the sting of energy price spikes. Notice what all of this really is. It is a refusal to be sentimental. A mill is a machine and a market, nothing more. And the owners who understood that outlived the ones who thought they were in the newspaper business. Fifth, they integrated and stayed close to customers, owning the mill and the box plant together, near the cities that buy the boxes. So freight never eats the thin margin. This lesson is cold and clear. Do not fall in love with your product. Follow the fiber to wherever the demand has gone. Convert, recycle, run full, and own your energy. So does owning a paper mill actually work? Somebody pays. It can. Enormously. But only if you are pointed at the paper the world still wants, and are willing to change when it changes. For the right owner, on the right grade, it is a powerful business. You run a giant, defensible machine, making an essential material the modern world cannot ship a single parcel without. Ride the packaging boom at scale, with recycled fiber and your own power, and a paper mill becomes a quiet giant, turning wood and old boxes into the wrapping of the entire economy. But be honest about the machine. It is a hungry, capital-swallowing giant that you cannot cheaply stop and cannot cheaply change, aimed at a commodity whose price you do not control. Point that machine at a dying grade, and no amount of skill will save you. Demand just leaves. The price falls below your costs, and your magnificent machine bleeds you dry. Get it right, follow the fiber to the boom, and you own a piece of the invisible skeleton of modern commerce, the box behind every order the world places. You never really owned paper. You owned a machine, and a bet on which kind of paper the world still wanted. Say it plainly. What sat on your balance sheet was never really a pile of paper. It was a giant machine, and a wager on demand. And demand for the printed word had quietly walked out the door. Yet the mills that died were not the ones with the worst machines or the weakest crews. They were the ones that loved the newspaper too much, and could not bring themselves to become the box. The paper was never the business. That machine was the business, and the willingness to change what it made. The internet did not end the paper mill. It just decided which ones deserved to live. Closing frame.